Hello, how you doing?
Doing all right. A bit sick, but doing all right.
Ooh, yeah. I just had a friend around for dinner after a day playing with radios and not getting any of them working um,
Mm.
with friends, but I managed to use a piece of a circuit board as a fuse. I will have to fix
Ooh.
that. Yes, I plugged it in and then there was the special smoke, but it was only copper special smoke, not capacitor special smoke, which is much worse. So,
Ah, yeah, the magic smoke.
yes. But
Yeah,
then one of the friends came round for dinner and he's had a bit of a rough time. And so I recommended this podcast to him because, as much as I've been leery of recommending it to friends because of the stuff we go into, I felt like he could benefit from it and he seemed to agree and so was enthusiastically asking for the link. So, hi, friend. Probably a month or
yeah.
so since you've been around here.
I love how you say that you've been, you know, trying to refrain from mentioning it, but like you're the one who's mentioning it to all your friends, which I still think is funny. No one in my town knows I do this. I think I've made a vague reference to one person and one child, neither of which were like interested. And even if they were, I don't think I would have told them.
I think I'm
I think
much
I
more
might have said this
extroverted.
on the podcast for this. No, it's not that.
Well, much more
I think
extroverted
it's
than I think I am.
I think that's true. Yeah, you're extroverted, but you're like socially awkward. Did you? I don't. You probably didn't watch that video I sent you because you didn't manage. Yeah, doesn't matter. Phone stuff.
Which
There was a good
one?
quote at the end of it, which I thought was funny, which was
The Peterson one about why Andrew Tate is wrong.
yeah.
Okay.
But right at the end of it, there was a funny quote about engineers, about engineers being the only high skilled people that aren't able to turn, you know,
Turn status into attractiveness.
intelligence. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've heard that elsewhere. Not wrong, not wrong, because it's like autistic rates in
yeah,
engineering departments are very high.
yeah. Something about not being able to turn, intelligence, job skills, expert ability, and money into status. And it's very much there's something about that I think lands really well because um, engineers, their job is sort of to turn one thing into another and make it work and to like figure it out and plan it through. And they just haven't been able to do that,
Well, they kind of get
which I
shoved
think
in
is
a
quite funny.
you sort of shove the back room back. You shove the engineers in a back room and say, work it out, and they'll happily tinker away doing the thing, and then present you with the thing that they've spent months on. Then you'll say, "Oh, okay, done." And they'll it's the happy tinkering away with the thing that is kind of the opposite of the flamboyant showing off.
I think it's actually, now that we've mentioned that, the project you're working on and the advice you've been asking from me and stuff on the masculinity front, I feel like that is quite literally an engineer attempting to engineer being, social status.
Yeah, honestly attractive. Not
Yeah, how do I yeah, when I say engineer, I don't mean like manufacturing falsely. I
yeah.
mean you're an engineer literally, and you're approaching this the way an engineer would, which is like, how do I solve this problem? What's the pieces that I can fit together, and how do I do it without compromising my other beliefs and ethics? Um, Polytheistic joke I could make there, but I won't bother. Um, that's a lateral thinker. It's really annoying. I had an hour and a half conversation with my wife today. Um, I asked her a question, and she answered it. One of two answers, and we had an hour and a half conversation that just spiraled off out of nowhere, all off into the mist. And then right at the end, I was like, "So what was your other answer to that question?" Because it's like, a branch, but I could choose one of the branches to go down, and then there's another branch. I choose that branch to go down, and I'll just cascade down a branch rather than like addressing the top level and then moving down. Hmm. I want to know
Yeah.
more about personalities.
Oh,
It's
we're
difficult
definitely
to see
complicated.
how other people's brains work.
The therapist I was going to was thinking that it would be worth me getting or finding a test for the Asperger's spectrum. And he was commenting that going to the support groups of that type might be beneficial to me for finding a partner because I think the way we flesh it out together is that I've probably got something like that, but I'm good enough at compensating that I can look normal.
I'm pretty confident that's what both me and my wife are.
Hmm.
People used to look at me like I was disabled. I've always felt this, and I used to ask people all the time. And I've always felt like everyone was lying to me, like I was, mentally retarded in some form or another, and people like just wouldn't tell me. And then I met my wife, and we talked, and I feel normal. And every now and then, usually when I was a little out of it for one reason or another, I'd look at her and I'd think like, "Wow, are we both just the same kind of retarded?" And that's why we work, and everyone else just doesn't, like, we don't mesh. But I'm not a big fan of the theory of um, divergent is disabled
Yeah,
thinking,
it's more
as
differently
far as I'm
specialized.
concerned. It's not just that, it's just that um, I believe personality and brain structure, type of thinking, all of this, I believe it's a combination of many factors. And you are just the sum of your position on many sliders. It's a rough way of saying it, but I don't think that a person has a condition called Asperger's. I think they're just really far off the scale in, say, like focus on detail or something like that, and
Hmm.
that's what makes them categorized as this, this condition or whatever.
Yeah,
And then there's developmental questions thrown in there.
it's part of the
Isn't it sort of the
discretizing
therapist's
everything.
job to do that?
Um,
You see, the therapist recommended that you should go and do,
I think
a test for such things.
counselor might be a different term. He's someone with experience helping people through issues. I think couples therapy is his main job. Who was half volunteering for it at the men's support charity I went to when I first needed help after, well, thought I needed help because I didn't know which way I was up anymore. Um, after leaving the ex and uh, yeah, rather than having the deep psychological studies, he's more got experience and training in helping people through tough times.
So he's more like us,
Yeah,
just like a person who wants to help other people and has advised people before and had it work,
yeah, and
rather
had
than someone
training
who has
to
the.
get there.
Oh, he is? Okay. Just
Yeah.
not, he's not a psychologist, effectively.
No, he's not a psychologist in the Peterson sense of a engineer of the mind.
Yeah. Turns out if you want to do an IQ test, you actually have to go and see a licensed psychologist. I looked into it. We did some online ones and then did some research on it and found that you really can't do them online. It just doesn't work. You have to go to a
Hmm.
person who has expert training in that and then do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it should be nice. I'd like to do that.
It's really interesting to find out where the strengths that you didn't see are. Because if you compare yourself to the sort of average of the society around you, then you'll see most clearly where you have trouble in comparison to that, where you lack in comparison to that. But it's hard to see where you excel because the the society. You notice the inadequacies, not the excellences.
Hmm. I know you're correct because I know that we're more sensitive to negative feedback,
Hmm.
but I have a hard time with that, like landing for me.
In the sense
I
of,
don't think that I don't
and
think that applies in my experience.
yeah, you've got enough disagreeableness to counteract that. Hmm,
Yeah, I always
to a large degree, but not
I
totally.
was I think it's more that I was always shunned, so I had to search for my value.
Hmm.
Like I needed to find it in order to feel, if everyone else is not liking me, they're probably right. That's the default assumption of the brain. It's not everyone else, it's you.
Hmm.
So I, looked at myself for a long time because if I was going to believe that they were wrong and that I am, valuable in X, Y way or valuable period, I needed to know how or why. It was a necessity thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's part of the journey I'm on at the moment of finding my own value so I can portray that in order to attract someone who would be attracted to that which I have.
Right. Okay, I think that ties well into, well, our previous discussions, but also what we were talking about in the pre-show. Haha. Um, Getting professional. Your, I was talking about my recent decision that I'm going to spend some money on myself for things that I just want because I just want them. And you're talking about recognizing value in yourself so that you can reject that confidence in your own value to attract someone. And I think we've had a conversation before about the value of displaying that, of displaying your value. And I think it's a good conversation to have because you have an objection to that about like peacocking being a bad thing.
I think a lot of that
And I
objection was based in sort of self-enforced humility, because I found through the help of the counselor that um, I hadn't plugged anything. I'd made the choice to compare myself to the top of any given hierarchy. Like a 95% test score was 5% failure. And that I'm not smart. I'm not as smart as Stephen Hawking because I knew I had a highish IQ from having it tested, so I didn't want to get arrogant, so I compared myself to Stephen Hawking to point out the relative lack of smarts, to attempt to not be arrogant. And I found that I had, through that process, not plugged anything into the positive side of my self value equation. And after I
right,
had,
you erred on the side of humility
hmm, heavily,
to an extreme. You're saying,
yeah. And then after realizing that with the counselor, I sort of sat down and thought about it and hang on, okay, what's how should you evaluate your self-value? It's like, well, what would someone else value? Certain skills, certain abilities, certain actions, and it's like, okay, list them out. And single dad, happy son, um, mechanical skills, maintaining a household, good financial sense, um, engineering skills, gathering more skills through hobbies, which combined reason for those of seeking to be valuable while not accounting for that value and actually enjoying them. So there's a mixed motivation in there.
I
And yeah, when I listed them all out, or at least made myself aware of them and looked at them as, yes, these are reasons I'm valuable. I'm actually worth something. There was a part of me that was just celebrating, like, I have value! And that was enjoyable.
think it's interesting to note that all of that is good. Don't get me wrong. I felt an internal reaction to what you were saying when you were stating that you were listing out the things that you do or have in the values as if it was someone else, according to someone else's criteria,
Hmm.
or which I guess would be abstract of society in general. And I don't know, I felt an unease when you said that.
It is, to a degree, external validation, internalized external validation, you could say. I don't think it's an end point, but I think it's a good step.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know why I feel this way, but I just thought it would be worth saying that a part
well,
of me objected pretty quickly to saying um, that you should be judging yourself on your own criteria of what you value, because what culture or society or other people value isn't always a good thing.
that's a value that seems pretty core to you. The not valuing society's values just because they're society's values in the sense of the social aspect. Like
Mm,
the values must stand on their own feet.
yeah, I, being someone who is always, I don't want to say discriminated, I don't like that word, but cast aside, not valued by
Hmm.
society. I had an inherent distrust of what society deems as valuable. Um, in any conversation about humility, it reminded me of the that virtue lies on a spectrum between two vices,
Hmm.
and I think that that's right on the money with humility. To
Yeah,
be 100% humble is what you were doing, and that's castrating yourself. And
definitely.
then the other end is pure narcissistic arrogance. Um, and I do my best to not be that. I do my best to try and be near the middle. Um, I'm sure that in this podcast I will seem rather arrogant to people, and that's okay. But I would like to note that in my personal life, I do my best to humble myself before other people that I meet, and to not presume that I'm above them, and to interact with them properly, and to not be, cocky or cocksure.
It's crazy how
Um,
we come at so many things from opposite ends of the spectrum. Like you're
well,
trying not to be arrogant. I'm learning not to be excessively detrimentally humble.
it's upbringing in my eyes. Like when I spoke before about, I was outcast from, let's say, my peers or the judgment of elders, whatever, when I was young. The society in general deemed me as unvaluable. So I had the choice to either accept that diagnosis and be, probably rather depressed of, I'm useless, I'm pathetic, I'm this, that, or the other, which I did a bit. But, I'm not actually, um, what's it? I am towards the neurotic end of the neuroticism spectrum. So I cannot not experience the negative feelings when someone else judges me negatively, which I think might be not what you expect for someone like me. It actually has to be rather hard, and I can't not feel that. I'm not immune to that pain. I'm actually rather sensitive to it on the spectrum of that, more than most people. I don't remember what it is. I might be like 85th percentile towards that. So I did have that, and I had depression and all this because of that, and many other factors, which I think we've talked about before, like the discovery of the darker parts of the world around the same time. Off track. But the solution was to view society's judgment of me as wrong, which obviously I believe, and I've proven these days, and I don't think because of that, I'm no longer judged that way. Probably still somewhat, but it's irrelevant. Sorry, I'm losing track. I am still sick.
I'm just thinking.
I viewed other people. I viewed the average person as stupid because the average person judged me in such ways, and I knew I was clever, and I talked to most people, and I could tell by talking to most people that most people weren't. So I'm saying by necessity, in order to have any self-value and to preserve my life through dark times, I had to judge other people, or judge the judgment of me as wrong and stupid, and therefore the people doing the judgment as wrong and stupid. So I had to elevate myself above them. And that became default. And the arrogant part of me believes that I'm right about that. I don't even think it's arrogant. Confident. I will say confident. I do confidently believe I'm better than most people. But because of that, I try to temper it with humility. And that makes me wonder, those environmental circumstances creating that reaction which created me. And yes, of course, I'm very high and disagreeable, so that helps a lot with my position. It makes me wonder about your interaction with societal judgment, or I wouldn't presume to know how it played out for you. Some part of your development that you think may have had an effect on your era towards the humility side of the scale.
I think a similar dynamic to yours, though, with an agreeable temperament instead of a disagreeable one, and not to the same extent by any means. It was more schoolyard child rejection because you're a bit odd.
And accepting that.
Yeah, and not wanting to. This one's a bit harder to pin down as to whether it's a root cause or something that was caused along the way, but not wanting to fall into vice in the form of arrogance and fearing that actively. And so seeking to damp down any arrogance, seeing the striving for self-improvement as positive, and therefore if you set your bar, the higher you set the bar, the more you'll work to self-improvement, which is flawed reasoning, but that was the further away from arrogance you are. And in relating with other people, in relating to an individual, humility seems like a good strategy. Like, you don't know someone else's story,
Agreed.
but at the same time, you can't have a clean slate. It's like you, on a subconscious, innate level, we all make judgments about the people we meet. And I've started becoming more accepting of the existence of that within my psyche recently, and so I've been noticing it. Like, see someone whose face appears to have been damaged through drug use at some point in their life. I think that's what it is. Or a guy who had a slightly funny face and sticky out ears, and the thought occurring of he's a bit ugly. Or for the if a woman had the drug affected face, yeah, no, I really wouldn't touch that for a relationship type thought. And sort of just noticing those thoughts and being aware of them, which is a bit of a change from years ago, sort of hiding or actively counteracting anything like that because of fearing arrogance. But at the same
Do you
time, if
think?
you talk to someone, you relate to them as a person, and I'm aware of or I try to be aware of the preconceptions I might have, and aware that they could all be wrong.
Mm,
And like, don't walk into the conversation assuming things about the person's life and experience. Like, there are life tracks that make it basically impossible to avoid drug use except through, frankly, inhuman levels of determination. And to criticize someone for failing at an impossible task is not right. So, yeah, I think we're trying to find, like, there's a too arrogant and there's a too humble.
mm,
And too arrogant tends to harm those around you, too humble tends to harm you instead. And so it's less obvious, but it's also not ideal. Like, the people who are lauded as successful are not the humble ones. Oh, although in saying
mm,
that, there are ones who, yeah,
yeah, it's
hmm,
not as simple. I actually got into an argument with someone about that once. It's not as simple as you might think on that front.
hmm,
I think okay, there's a few things that popped up in my mind during that one. One, I wonder if you had an encounter with effectively a bully in your early life and you had sort of a resolve of, this person is clearly arrogant in an undeserved fashion and I don't want to be that. And then you have that hesitation there. I also noted that when you were talking about the judgment of a drug user thing, it seemed that the conversation was more on understanding rather than self value or confidence, which I think is interesting. It made me think of the conversation between being too understanding and being not understanding enough, which is something going on in the political space for us at the moment. And I wonder how that ties in with the idea of humble versus arrogant, which is also really the idea of judgment, of judging others, of judging yourself, and how to judge yourself in relation to others,
hmm.
and
Because
what the optimal way of doing that is,
it
the
can be
healthy way.
true that people in bad life circumstances are trapped in destructive patterns of behavior, and that then they can drag other people down with them. And it can take a lot, like the hitting rock bottom is the sort of archetypical. way people get out of it is that they end up in such a situation that forces them to confront the pattern of behavior they're in and go to rehab for the drug use or whatever. And
Yeah.
like you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
I think there's a note worth saying there of you can definitely be too understanding. And I think we as a society are at the point where we are too understanding and too sympathetic of people who have gone down bad paths,
Then you end up
who
enabling
become
those bad
criminal.
paths.
Yeah, not just drug use, but like criminal behavior, violent behavior.
Because if you take the
You know,
drug use one to its logical
yeah,
extreme, you understand a person and their suffering and how they're in a dark place and the only light in their life is the drug use, and you empathize so much with their pain that you go out and get them more drugs.
yeah, or the poor murderer, if only he had a better school teacher or whatever,
Mm.
rather than being like, yeah, okay, I get that, but unacceptable behavior must be punished. You don't release people because you feel sympathetic for them. There seems to be a big issue with judgment, and I wonder how that ties into personality.
I'm just thinking
I
of
also thought I
mm,
wanted to mention, because I am towards the other end of the spectrum on judgment or confidence or arrogance, depending on how you put it. Um, you were talking about the way you should interact with a person when you first meet them and how you should approach people.
mm,
And I wanted to make it clear for whatever listeners that when I meet people and when I interact with people, I am always humble and open and kind and caring to the people I meet and interact with. The extreme levels of confidence or arrogance or whatever it is you want to say that I'm talking about that I have is like an internal metric. It's not something that I say to other people. It's not something that I display by trying to, you know, I don't know, dominate them or whatever it is that people do. I feel no need to be validated in it or display it.
I think you come across more as self-assured. It's kind
Yeah,
of like the
it's
domination ends with you. You,
yeah. I
yeah.
do not need to. I think this is the whole alpha versus sigma thing. I do not need to dominate another person to feel dominant.
Hmm.
I am what I am. I have confidence in myself, and if no one in the world knew it but me, I'd still be happy. I wouldn't feel any less at all. I don't need to show it to people. I don't need to lord it over people. The only reason I even mention it in this conversation is that, you know, germane, is that the right word?
Hmm.
No, actually, not what that
Relevant.
word means. Relevant, yeah. That these are the kinds of things we're talking about, so it works. It's relevant information. But it's not something that I mention to people.
I wonder if
Like,
the introversion
yeah,
extroversion is also part of that.
hmm, maybe. Like what an alpha type character is an extroverted dominant person, an extroverted disagreeable person. That would make sense because they're always competing. You know, they're always interacting with someone and being, you know, disagreeable, if that's what characterizes confidence or dominance. I don't actually know.
I think it's an aligned axis, but not precisely introversion versus extroversion, because um, I think
I
oh,
don't mean for dominance. I mean for the alpha versus sigma thing. It would make sense in my mind that the sigma personality type that everyone's going on about
yeah,
is effectively an introvert.
yeah,
I do this on my own. I don't need to tell you about it.
yeah.
I
Whereas
do it
extroversion's
anyway.
all about interacting with others and showing them who you are.
Yeah, which is what the alpha thing is.
Hmm.
Alpha is head of pack, not just dude on his own doing well.
Mm.
It's doing well compared to, in relation to others. I think maybe disagreeableness and combination of neuroticism might be the dominant thing.
Yeah,
But
because
then that's also interesting because I'm high in neuroticism. So I'm not sure how that lands with me either.
well, the stereotype of the alpha in my head is often associated with a great deal of insecurity because they are pushing the dominance out in an effort to make up for their own insecurity.
Maybe. That does also seem, I'm not saying you're wrong in some cases, but it seems a bit convenient of an explanation for someone who isn't. I'm not saying you, make that clear. But I can see a person who is not a dominant or confident or charismatic figure looking at someone who is in that sort of alpha position and going like, yeah, but you're just insecure on the inside and weak. And that's why you do this. Rather than, they're actually just what they seem to be. It seems a very convenient way to disregard someone in a higher position in the hierarchy than you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I do have something like that where it's a no,
It wasn't a jab at you,
no,
to be clear.
no, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a perception that dominance in a hierarchy is associated with insecurity, but there's arrogant dominance and there's humble dominance. And if we're talking technically, like, oh, what was it? There was the analogy made in a video of if I put a leash on you and make you crawl along the floor, that's dominance. So it's it's
Dominance versus competence.
yeah, it's like seniority in the hierarchy. There's arrogant sort of I'm in charge and I can throw my weight around and make things happen. And that I feel like it's often a mask of insecurity because people know that the power they have only comes from the ones around them doing what they say. But then there's
Yeah.
humble dominance, which can be psychopathically driven, of course, as with so many other behaviors. But it's like,
Anything can be gamed for a short time.
yeah, humble dominance is more someone being given the top job by those around them because those around them recognize the competence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. Someone who is in their position ruling through power because that's the only way they can versus someone who is what held up by those beneath them because they're good at what they do,
Hmm.
and that's why they're in their position. And they don't need to use power because they have respect from others through those means. Yeah, I think there's something right in your diagnosis there.
Because similar with culture, or ape, or I think was it baboons? No, gibbons.
It's most primates.
Yeah, yeah. One, the strongest can rise to the top by being brutish and beating up all the opposition. But when he has a bad day, the next two strongest gang up and beat him up and tear him limb from limb, and
Yeah,
then he's dead.
that's why
The
psychopaths work, but not for long.
yeah, the weaker one negotiates and takes care of those around them and makes alliances to climb to the top, and then they, because they're still doing that, hang around at the top for a long time, and that's eminently desirable for the group as a whole because it's stable and
Yeah.
everyone's taken care of.
Elected.
Yeah. And of course, there'll be rivals that are pushed down by that and so on, but it's sort of if they lost their
So,
base of support, they'd still fall, so they still maintain that.
going back to where we started this, um, on valuing yourself and then taking action towards that. What have you made any action or commitment or like spent money on yourself in a way of signifying said value or
Well, I've been trying to sort of change my appearance. I got a haircut today and um, cut it a bit. I halved the length of my hair, which uh, recognizing that I'd been wanting it longer from idolizing slightly hippie dressed heroes in the permaculture movement as a child, and sort of trying to mature that focus and um
not the most intense,
no,
confident figures.
but the ones who seemed like they were making the most difference at the time.
No,
But
I get that idealization, but I'm just
mm,
making reference to you're wanting to be more a more confident
ah,
person who is exuding value and has a presence. People like that, they have a presence, but their presence is sort of like, yeah, I don't care, you know.
yeah, that's the hippie side of it. There's a I use that to describe the look, not so much the personality. And not
Yeah, but looks are
necessarily,
indications.
yeah, yeah, but also like buying button-up shirts and trying to change the look, less hoodies and t-shirts and
So you're getting
more,
more of a sharp look.
yeah, and started wearing
Um,
the my Oppa's watch that I'd ended up with, which quite a nice watch, one of the self-winding ones.
nice.
Yeah, and had to get a new strap for that because the one it had didn't work for me, as in it was a stretchy one and wouldn't stretch small enough to hold itself onto my wrist. So
So you're spending some money on clothes, on appearance, cutting your hair, getting yourself presentable
yeah,
to
working on it.
reflect your value. No,
Yeah,
that's good. I think that's a good step forward.
yeah, and it's not the sort of thing that you can just say, okay, let me do the confident look now. It's like, okay, well, what the hell does that look like? Well, let's see if this piece will fit, and one bit at a
Yeah,
time.
fashion is hard. Fashion is hard, I can tell you that.
Hmm.
Anyone who says it's simple, it's really not.
Yeah, I think this topic also segues well into not trying to hide from this one if you had any more to discuss on it, but it segues well to the conditional love or the conditional nature of most love.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that last time, and you wanted to expand on it. Well, we were killing sacred cows. That's what we were doing.
Yeah,
I remember now.
because oh, so many relationships, it's like in the initial phase, people idolize their partners often, and most often with naive individuals in the relationship. And then after a while, they might end up saying, "You weren't who I thought you were," oh, and terrible breakup and yada yada. Probably most often in high school, when people are very naive. Uh, and uh, or someone changes, like they stop doing the things that made them attractive, and then the other partner's like, this isn't who I fell in love with, even if they had a true perception of the person at the time. It's like, you took up these hobbies and you started doing this, and I don't feel loved anymore. Oh, and then it all goes sour and so on. It's like children get the most free pass because most of the time you'll always love your kids no matter what they do, but you might not like them. And as a
Mm.
parent, it's like there are times when you, speaking generally, not so much specifically, but there are going to be times where you're like, ah, I really don't like the way you're carrying on right now. No, you can't have that toy. I wish you'd stop this tantrum. Go to sleep. And like I've had times, I'm not sure if I described it on here, but if I haven't, it's worth going over that. when I just needed space and a break and just like my personal space, and to not have my son like within a quarter of a meter of me or leaning on me, just playing there because he wants to be close. And so, sort of feeling snapping coming, um, or having cracks of snaps coming out, ended up just going into my room and shutting the door. And then he was on the outside banging on it because he wanted to come in to be with me and wanted to play or wanted to wrestle or something. And it's like, I just need a little break. And that could fit as, I don't like this. I still love you, but I really don't like this. And so, as a child grows up, and say if they do things that the parent strongly disagrees with, the parent may continue to always love them, although, oh, depending on too many factors to really say that, I guess. But like is very different. But to take it back to where I was, in relationships between adults, something that's come up a few times is that I've seen is a guy asking a woman, "Do you want to be with a guy that cries?" And it's like, sure, I want him to be vulnerable. What if he cried every week? What if he cried every day? And what if he sat on the couch not doing anything all day because he lost his job and didn't know what to do? And how long would you stick around for that? And it's like, love is not, I love this individual no matter what they do in the future or who they become. Like, that's obsessive love, almost, I think. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm feeling it out as I go. But
I don't think
then,
it's real.
sorry?
I don't think that idea is real.
Yeah, there's a projected, they're love, in that case it's loving something from within your own mind projected on the cardboard cutout of the other person, which is the same as a lot of racism and that sort of thing. It's like you've got a cardboard cutout of a group you dislike and you project the bad feelings onto that individual. It's like, oh, there was a black guy back in, oh, I can't remember when it was, but he joined the Ku Klux Klan and ended up de-radicalizing a lot
Yeah.
of them by just meeting them as an individual. And then they saw, oh, well, this person, this friend of mine, isn't all the things that I've,
Daryl Davis.
yeah. And if you do that to an individual who you think you love, you are usually in for a rude awakening. Or if they put on a persona in order to attract you, then you're both in a bad situation because the person who put on the persona is not loved, who they play is loved, and the person who was attracted is in a bad situation because who they fell in love with isn't who they think they were. But
Yeah,
if,
I'm not sure. I think love is such a messy word.
oh, totally.
Okay, I get why the Greeks had like 7 words or whatever for it, which makes sense
Hmm.
because yeah, we mash them all into one and then think it's one thing, and it's not. It's it's such a difficult and complicated feeling and emotion, and it's so much further complicated by feelings of not being loved enough as a kid or whatever, and then projecting that on your partner, which I think is very common. Um, Unconditional love, I don't think that's real. I don't think that's real, even for children. A relationship is, well, it's a bond. I hesitate to say contract, but it effectively is. It is a relationship between two people, and there are conditions on that relationship.
Hmm.
And you can 100% break bonds and break relationships, and it will hurt people, because you loved them.
but it can be immensely strong too. It can be, I love these things about you, and as long as these things are here, I will stand by you through hell. And
I think, yeah, I think there are bonds that, okay, bonds can be broken, but they don't disappear. You forever carry something with it forward. We are pair bonding species. We have an instinct for that, as much as that's, unacceptable blasphemy these days. Um, you bond with a person. I don't think that that is just a disposable thing. But in saying that, it's not unconditional on continuing the relationship. I think the bond stays, but the relationship can fall apart with children, with parents, with intimate partner.
hmm.
I think that they're separate things. So when we say unconditional love, do we mean the bond? Do we mean the relationship itself?
Because relationships between kids and parents can definitely fall apart.
Hmm. I just got the quote of hate is too strong of emotion to spend on someone you don't love.
Oh, yes, they're so close. It's like,
So perhaps love is unconditional and never leaves because it's an expression of um, humans' permanent bonding. But the relationship can fall apart. You can be betrayed by the other person, and that love will manifest into hate. But the person still affects you. It's
I feel like it needs a different word, like attachment.
the word love has been so messed
Yeah.
by our culture. You
Because
say I love you to your partner, or I do, and they say it back to me, and then I just sort of go like, okay, I don't. What does that mean?
I'm
I'm
wondering
not actually sure.
if love is the positive manifestation of attachment and hate is the negative manifestation of attachment. Like you have a villain or arch nemesis to pull out the archetype, um, who's deeply hated, right? There's still a strong attachment there. And then you
Mm,
have a deep love for a brother, for a parental figure, a child's, or a lover, right? These are different forms of attachment, but they are all, I, your welfare is meaningful to me. And even in
it's a
hate,
feeling that we're trying to express as a concept, and I don't know if we really understand the feeling because it's like biological impulse, and it's to do with pair bonding, mating, child rearing, and familial attachment, community bonding
hmm, I think
for the purpose
acknowledging,
of survival by keeping people together.
yeah, acknowledging that it's not a abstract concept is important, I think, because we can turn it into an abstract concept and try and understand it that way, but fundamentally it is very deeply rooted in
Mm.
in our brain structure. It's yeah.
I think it's important, especially in this day and age, for people to accept the facts about bonding in humans. We bond with people, and that bond affects us deeply and cannot be cast aside casually. And love, romantic engagement, sex, these things are obviously rooted in biology. And that biology is based upon pairing with someone to raise children over the course of our entire life, because we only lived, long enough to have some children. And then once they, were adults too, we were likely pretty close to dead as we evolved.
Though the existence of menopause indicates that a significant portion of the population lived to that age. And I think like the tribal elders may only 25% of the population may only yeah, only 25% of the population may get to the tribal elder age because the dumb ones sort of kill themselves off by stupidity along the way. That's a very crude way of saying it, but or the unlucky ones.
Even still,
Hmm.
65 being like top end is probably a good estimation. 40 something average.
The
Um,
averages get skewed by young deaths. So how are childhood deaths in the first 10 years included in the average? Because then there's a long tail on that, I think.
feels a bit nitpicky.
I think the existence
Um,
of elders is significant.
I'm not saying it's not, but my point is that I think if anything, it makes my point more important. Human beings evolved to be mate for life pair bonding species. That's what we evolved to be. We're not promiscuous creatures. Now, because of our free willed nature, things don't always work. So when things work, we look for a new mate.
Mm.
We're not going to lie down and die when things don't work out. We're not going to stay when things are wrong. But all things being ideal, a human being will meet a partner that they work with and they will bond through the act of sex, and then they will stay with that partner until they die.
Mm.
And that is how we evolved.
Yeah. And then
And people don't like that
yeah,
because it puts all kinds of restrictions on them.
in the form of
And I
an
think,
evolutionary
yeah,
evidence for that, if I recall correctly, testicle size compared to body mass among primates is correlated to promiscuity. So the ones that mate around more tend to have larger testes to be the ones who would procreate, and humans have some of the smallest. So it's
as well
that
as
deep in
the
our
sexual
ancestry.
selection stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sexual selection, the hidden ovulation, the the rate, the what is it, uh, the investment cost in raising children.
Mm. Yeah, and the wanting to be
People, yeah,
certain that the
people don't
child is
like it.
yours. Mm.
Yeah, people don't like it
Why?
because they want to be able to, because they want to be able to sleep with strangers and not have any consequences for it. And it's really convenient to tell, lie to young women to say that, you know, or it's not even that, yeah, no, to say that it's okay to go and do that
Mm.
and that it has no negative effect on them at all, which it has horrific negative effects on them. It's a crime as far as I'm concerned. Society has lied to young women to make them be sluts effectively, so
Mm.
that they can be used by men at ease for sex without any form of commitment or responsibility.
Is this a return of the shadow?
It's the men abusing them.
Well,
This is what it is.
in the sense of the women who promote this, I feel like there's a return of the shadow at play of um am I mixing up some concepts
No,
here?
I don't think so. I think it's conscious.
Hmm.
I think it's conscious because Return of the Shadow in the current situation would be women realizing or having a deep instinct for family when it's discouraged, or an aversion to promiscuity when it's encouraged. That would be Return of the Shadow.
Yeah.
I think what's happening is against nature, and I think it's being promoted so that women can be used by men for sex without consequences or responsibility. And the women who themselves are promoting it have been, it's too, they're too far gone, is the way I would see it.
Yeah.
They've built their identity around it, and in order to criticize that, they would crumble their entire identity right to the core and probably not survive. And subconscious knows that for sure.
I think it's also important to point out that it's not just disadvantaging young women. It's like the men who become the most skilled at persuading women to sleep with them by playing the game most skillfully end up the saddest and the most hollow and emotionally, because they spend all their time playing a part and never being loved for themselves. And that sounds, I'm trying to think of a strong enough descriptor. It sounds like hell.
It's also does nothing but breed resentment and distrust between the sexes, which I think was part of the point. I think this is wrapped up in the attack on the family of particular nations, and only particular nations, as a means of destroying said nations. And I think that's what's wrapped up in all of this.
Do you think there's a a hope that in destroying said nations, um, the wealth of said nations could be concentrated while being maintained? So yeah, the wealth
Yeah,
as a whole
I didn't get
maintained.
that.
But do you think that the I'm looking at trying to find a motivation to destroy said nations beyond some kind of guilt complex, and concentration of wealth and power seems to be the one that comes to mind.
I think you're basing this on the assumption that the attempt to destroy said nations is internal.
I was assuming that externals to said nations would be from different cultures.
Yeah.
Oh, that particular one.
Yeah.
That does talk about said doing that a lot.
Yeah, they're pretty open about it. And horribly racist.
Hmm.
And the,
I
genocidal way.
hesitate to draw all the lines back to one place.
Yeah, I get that.
I
Believe me, I get that.
I'm not
I
saying
have a
that.
hard time not seeing it at this point. Like
Hmm.
when what's the thing when what 15 different signs point to the same person doing the crime, it's probably that person.
Hmm.
It's you know this is the thing that people keep mentioning. I think people confuse it a lot, which I think is really on the money. No one wants to believe it. Same with the institutions betraying us. It is really hard for the average person to accept that, like, every major institution in their nation has betrayed them and is lying to them and is seeking their destruction. It's much easier to accept that people pointing that out are like nuts or conspiracy theorists and not think much more about it.
Hmm. Or that said
It's such a big
institutions have been
ask to be
co-opted.
like, yeah, it's such a big ask for someone to believe that. it's always going to be easier for them to disbelieve you.
Mm.
You know, like, I don't know, pick any political issue over the last few years, Trump, fucking vaccines, the trucker protest, anything, the universities, the trans stuff.
Oh, there was an interview
For
I
an
saw with
average
him
person,
recently that
mm,
sort of makes the point about cutting to the heart of the issue a little bit as a little aside, but an interviewer was asking him, it's like, do you support Russia or Ukraine? And he was like, I want everybody to stop dying. It's like, well, yes, I think I agree with that. It's like,
well, okay, that's helpful. It's like, it almost feels like someone who's holding up the sign saying, I don't like poverty.
you're not wrong on
That sort of,
that, but I think it's not a solution, but it's like it's a
yeah,
an antidote, at least partial, to getting lost in the partisanship of it.
yeah.
Like
No,
that,
I,
yeah,
yeah, I kind of want to finish.
yeah,
I
yeah,
really
yeah.
want to
Sorry, that's
emphasize
fine.
that point that it's people in my position, people who are, I don't know what you call us. People call us conspiracy theorists, I guess. Yeah, it's not even that. There's so many of us now.
Would you?
Yeah, people will call anti-establishment, whatever,
Mm,
to sell to an average person that all forms of um all forms of media that have clout, reputation, you know, TV, news, radio, newspapers, journals, medical journals, the government press releases, the universities, um, the big corporations, every level of what is trustworthy and respected institutions that support and hold up our society to
mm.
convince anyone that they have all of them colluded to betray you, the individual, and sell you out to some other thing is such an unbelievable thing to ask anyone to believe. The fact of it is, it's real that this is what has happened, and even to a higher level, it's done at the behest of an enemy nation. Like, it's so ridiculous, the situation that we're in, and so absolutely disastrous. And then you can just layer on it and layer on it and layer on it. It's like, okay, not only have they betrayed you financially, they're attacking your family, they're attacking potentially your race as a close to genocidal attack. They're going after your daughters, they're going after your sons, they're going after every form of social relationship, they're going after the idea of competence, they're going after the idea of success, the idea of sex, the idea of truth, the idea of time. They're going after everything that holds up your society and only in your society. And every form of institution that's supposed to be supporting your society has been co opted by them and is attempting to destroy you. Like, how are you going to convince anyone of that, regardless of the fact that it's true?
I remember, or I think in World War
They're just going to
Two,
look at you and go, no, everything's fine, you're
yeah,
insane.
the first reports of the Nazi death camps were not believed, and it took quite a while and quite a lot of evidence before anyone
Mm.
believed that that was the case, that
Or
it
the
was.
Holodomor.
Sorry?
Everyone was singing their praises. Journalists going there and reporting, like, this is amazing, Soviet Union's doing so great. Like, just murdering everyone, and everyone's supporting them. And even when the truth came out,
Mm,
there's this great scene in a film called Mr. Jones that I watched. Absolutely brutal film. I don't know if I mentioned it before.
I
My
think
wife
so.
and I went to just watch a movie. I think it's a funny story. We went to watch a movie, went to this classy movie theatre in Christchurch, the Regent, I think. Really cool place. And, you know, I got a whiskey and she got a wine, and we were like, oh, we're so classy. We're going to watch this, like, boutique movie that I've never heard about. And we thought it was a spy movie. And it was a journalist who went to Soviet Russia and, like, escaped his detail and then went into Ukraine. And it was like firsthand reenactments of the Holodomor and like children eating each other and stuff. It was so brutal. I'm glad I had a whiskey. Yeah, it was, and we walked into that blind thinking like, oh, this will be a cool like spy movie. No, it was horrific. Best depiction I have seen of what it's like to be in a society like that. Worth watching for anyone listening, but very, very eye-opening. This guy, real story. He was the first one to get there. He witnessed it all. He came home. He wrote about it. He spoke to people about it. And there's this clip at the end of the movie where he's talking to Orwell and describing what he saw. And you can see this actor who's portraying Orwell, fighting with him to still believe in communism and socialism. And they're having this argument, and he's laying out what he's seen, and it's a perfect representation of the establishment at the time, who, even when presented with the facts and evidence, were still like, no, I want to support socialism. I want to support the idea. This can't be happening. The human ability to pretend that nothing's going wrong because they don't want to face the horror of it. And they'd rather just believe in the ideal of a perfect system that's working well for the people. The desire that we have to believe that things are going to be okay is immense. That things are okay. It's hard to overcome that.
I'm wondering if the that links into some of the issues of mine that we've been through of desperately wanting the world to be better. And in some cases, well, I can certainly see the attraction in choosing to believe things are better than they are because it's a hell of a lot less painful.
There's also the likelihood issue. Like,
Mm.
if you were going to run a statistical likelihood on whether things were okay and normal in the institutions that we built over the last, hundreds to thousands of years are functioning well, and we've got a relatively okay society that's suffering some troubles, or the other story that I mentioned. I'm not going to run down it again. I think I ranted pretty well about that. Like, which one is more statistically likely?
Yeah.
The story is so preposterous that any reasonable person would just listen to that and go like, no way. But when you look at it and you pay attention to what's going on in the world, it's very clear that's what's happening. And it's terrifying. I can understand even once looking at it not wanting to believe it. But for the average person, to get any whiff of that at all, they're just going to go, there's no way. I'm not even going to look into it. There's no way that that's what's going on. It's just, we're just having, these kids at campuses are being, stupid and they'll grow out of it. Or, we're just having some economic troubles that happens every now and then. We'll get past it.
Mm.
It's too tall of an order.
It's going to be a hell of a time to look back on in 50 years.
Yeah.
Because
the future is terrifying. Fuck, I hope it turns out okay, man. It could go real bad, real fast.
I think it will
And,
turn
we
out
nearly
okay.
did.
But I
Well,
think
we managed to get through the last few years,
a lot of
which was a
why,
surprise.
yeah, a lot of why it will turn out okay, I think, is that the ones for whom it does not turn out okay will die. And then it will be okay for the ones that are left. So,
Well, that's always the case. I just don't want me and my children to be in the we die camp,
yeah, history is written by the
um,
survivors.
which is kind of difficult because we're the ones targeted. And also, there's the other terrifying possibility of, the last time a specific ethnic group was, or ethnic group, culture, country, was targeted with absolute destruction in mind. They didn't lie down and take it. Someone rose to public prominence and rallied the people and rallied them really hard and started a world war that was really bad and did horrible things with their newfound power. And we're
Mm.
sort of poised in that situation, except not just against, Germany being the example, but like the entire West in one go. That could go really bad, like really bad. And, you know, that's not being considered as an option either.
Mm. We have seen
Typically,
militarism on the
when,
rise again.
yeah, like typically when a society is being, how do you say, when a culture is being attacked externally and a people almost effectively a people being told that they can't exist anymore, they don't generally lie down and take it. Like human beings are not made that way. And it's, somewhat concerning about the possibility that that's a rather non-zero chance. You could have a strong man crossing the Rubicon kind of moment in the West, and all of a sudden you have an ethnically supremacist empire with the greatest resources on the planet fighting the other ethnically supremacist empire with the second greatest resources on the planet and engaging in war. And both of them nuclear armed. And it makes the idea of our we spat with Russia kind of laughable.
Mm.
And it's so interesting. Like I really wonder about Biden and his team because he's portrayed as this buffoon. He's clearly got something going on, or he's an amazing actor. But at the same time, he's having this geopolitical spat with Russia. While the entire West is being destroyed from within, he's also going after the West's enemies. And oh, Russia, but no, that's really a proxy war with China.
Well, all the tariffs that Trump clumsily put in place have been solidified by the current administration, so they haven't backed any of that back.
I
At least
think
that's
the
what I've heard.
clumsily put in place thing is a little not giving him enough credit.
That's true. That's true. That was a characterization. It was
Like
a
he was on about
paraph.
China publicly.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because like the Biden administration, they're parroting the stuff that's destroying the culture out one side of their mouth. But at the other side, they're like hardening the military and making it obey the White House more. And they're like making international geopolitical moves, being very war hawky in the old Bush Obama kind of way. And, old me used to not like that because I was, libertarian and kind of thing, and why I liked Trump. But new me sort of looking at that and going, you know, they're showing all the signs of being really switched on and playing the geopolitical chess match against our enemies.
One thing that I
And that's
think,
a really good sign.
one trend that seems to be carrying on is America is becoming more interested in America and less interested in being the world police. Like post World War Two, the US Coast Guard and Navy
Um,
controlled
okay,
the oceans, and they that seems to be winding back.
but Ukraine,
I feel like
that's
that
not
can.
someone who is not world police.
I feel like that fits better under pursuing their own interests internationally rather than dominating the world for the sake of all the allies. Because when they made. Now, this is coming from Peter Zine, and he seems to be a bit of a um, conventionalist in terms of he's advised the US government on some things and tends to take their side of the story. But I think some things he's pointed out make a lot of sense. Um, so he was pointing out that uh, in the Cold War, or that period, the bribe that the US gave the rest of the world to side with them as opposed to the USSR was international trade, and they patrolled the oceans to prevent any form of privateering or things like that. So you just put something on a ship in solid confidence that you knew it would get there to wherever you were sending it. And now we've got this big international shipping system, and Ukraine seized two oil tankers, and the US Navy's gone naughty, naughty, and not actually done anything. And that system seems to have lost its military backing. And so
I
the
I
US
don't
is,
see how that fits.
well, they've instead focused on carrier groups. Instead of 1,000 battleships or whatever it was that could control the oceans, it's like 15 uh, carrier groups, where one of them is larger than all but three of the world's air forces, I think. So one of them can take over a country, basically. Um, but they can't patrol the oceans because it's too few of them.
Okay,
So,
I think you're trying to make a distinction here that I don't think is really there.
mm,
You've made this point about they used to be the world police and now they're just being like America's interest.
mm,
I don't think those are different things. I think America was always wanting to be the global dominant power because it's in America's interest.
mm.
They're not doing it because it's nice for other countries. You know, they invaded like 7 countries because they wanted to. They didn't care about them. It was American interest.
Yeah, more that the interests themselves are changing over time and what they see as best for
Mm,
America.
I don't think so. I think that America's been playing a long game for a long time, and the military has been running foreign policy for a long time and making a very long game chess moves against America's enemies. And, you know, like I said, old me would have not liked that so much. New me kind of likes that. Because I'm really, if they're actually on our side, then that's great. I don't want to be ethnically cleansed. Or live under communism, either way. Yeah, there seems to be, I mean, everyone knows there's two faces to the United States government. There's like the domestic one, that's the actual democracy influenced one, and then there's the international one, which is like empire and is not changing with administration and
Mm.
hasn't been for a long time. And I think there's been Cold War for, I don't know, 70 years more maybe.
So
And I think it's starting to heat up a bit, but I don't
mm,
think it's a new thing.
everyone seems to be on the downslope though. Like China's population peaking is starting to decline, and the US having various issues of their own, and us not having the social cohesion as a wider society to effectively combat the issues we face. Uh,
But that's the perfect time for war.
because then you that brings about the cohesion because of a common enemy.
Yeah, nothing unites people like war.
Mm,
Nothing kicks up an economy like war. Nothing. I mean, it's what nations do when they're in decline. They go to war. Generates revenue, generates social cohesion. Birth rates kick up too because people are like, oh, reality sinks in again, and people go back to traditional values. a good solid war and a draft might actually be exactly what the West needs.
That's a scary thought.
It is. It is. I'm happy knowing I'll never be drafted. That's great for me. My laundry list of defects and my genetics is kind of an advantage now.
Do they draft people who need
But
glasses?
on the other side of that, yes, they do. On the other side of that, I'm also kind of annoyed because if we were to actually be out and out going to war with our serious enemies, I would volunteer to go and fight China in a world war. I would be very, very clear about that. I don't like concentration camps or ethnic genocide, and I will 100% murder people to stop that happening if World War III was legitimately engaged. But we're not in a conventional war time. Now, maybe we are. Maybe it happens. I don't know. Who's going to predict the future at this point? But as far as I'm concerned, we're already at war with them, and we have been for a long time. But it's been espionage and cyber war, or whatever else you want to say, cultural war.
Mm.
And they've been doing a bloody good job at pulling us apart internally. And you're saying that things are collapsing over there. Maybe we're doing the same. Maybe we're actually pretty good at pulling them apart, and because we don't know what the fuck's going on inside there.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's weird
think
for me to say that. Imagine if I said that to people in my personal life, they'd look at me strange, saying like I would volunteer to go and fight China in a world war, and they sort of go, but we're not at war with them; they're not our enemy. Yeah, yeah. They're the greatest analogy to World War II Nazis that I could imagine. They're effectively the same thing. And we're all just
yeah.
like, nah, it's cool, we'll buy their phone.
The Uyghur Muslims would probably agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard descriptions of what they do to them, particularly the women. And that makes me very much want to go over and murder them. Like, no questions asked when you are doing those kinds of things to women. I want to kill you. And I'm feeling my blood boil right now. I have no qualms about that. I don't want to describe it, but I'm tempted to. It's enough to make me want to lay down my life to destroy them violently, even though I know I'd leave my family behind. And I understand how people went and fought in World War II now. I get it. I understand why men go to war. This is why, this feeling. You can't just let that exist. And, we don't care. The West doesn't care because we buy all their shit and they're doing it to Muslims and not Christians or Jews or whites, whatever. But they're doing it. I don't know. Do we need to describe to whoever's listening what's going on? I'm sure people listening to this podcast know.
I think that might get us banned
Maybe
from
not.
YouTube.
Yeah, the description of what's happening right now in is it Shenzhen? I don't remember the province they're doing it
Hmm. I'm
yeah,
just looking at
it's
my own
borderline
internal
Auschwitz.
reactions.
I think it's, as far as I'm concerned, what they're doing is worse than Auschwitz.
Hmm.
Worse. Because as far as I'm aware, Auschwitz wasn't a big hub for, organ harvesting or forceful impregnation and sterilization. Auschwitz just killed them in brutal ways, but that's like all they did. For a nation to put Auschwitz and the Nazis to shame is a hell of an achievement. And yeah, how the entire world isn't raging about that nonstop is kind of beyond me.
Well, it's interesting looking at my own internal reaction to this.
Mm.
Um, Rather blank, as in I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to start assessing it. Because a lot of the
Perhaps,
evidence is reasonably clear, and I'm aware of enough to. I haven't looked into it deeply, but I'm aware of enough to agree on the surface with most of what you're saying. And then I go to the logical conclusion, and being a much more agreeable person than you, the blood boiling response is less easily triggered. And I don't
yeah,
like conflict. And
I'm wondering if there's I wonder if there's a relationship issue that doesn't feel right. Being in touch with violent emotions, perhaps a want or a feeling towards violence is like an emotion that you have to practice to be in touch to, maybe? I don't know. Or that you could dissociate from.
that doesn't sound unlikely, a dissociation with violent emotions.
Yeah. Which makes me think, obviously, that there's like a part of the subconscious to be explored there. But it would make sense because I feel as though I am, you know, rather in touch with my violent side to the point of difficulty in controlling it.
Hmm.
And you seem the opposite. Like you don't have aggressive responses to anything as far as I can tell.
And I've been feeling like that is a lack, which I feel like this needs to be qualified, and because it's the sort of thing that can be taken the wrong way, like, oh, you want to be a brute. It's like, no, I want to be willful.
Lacking it's not going to help you in your dating prospects, by the way.
Not a small, that's not a small part of my motivation.
Mm. Well,
Yes.
it's just think it's worth noting that, and it's good that you're aware of it.
Yeah. Not in
For
a.
whoever's listening, um, violent men are 100% more likely to reproduce, which means women like it. You know, they say that they like sensitive people. Part of that's true because they like someone who's caring and kind, but they like violence too
Yeah.
because that's capacity to defend and protect.
Hmm. The way I've come to understand that is that women are much more obviously aware of the danger the world poses to them. And
That's a good way. Yeah.
so, like, someone described it as she does talks, and she would say, okay, everyone in the room who's feared for your life, put up your hand. Every woman's hand goes up, and a few men. And
Yeah.
that, for them, it's they had a particular experience that they can point to. And okay, what about in the last year? All the women's hands stay up, some of the men's go down. It's like, unless the particular experience was in the last year, and so on until get down to last week, and probably all the women's hands are still up because a noise behind them in the dark and they're afraid for their life just like that. And because they are
Yeah.
women are predisposed to see the danger because they are more vulnerable to it, where men, when in danger, will feel an aggressive response, and I'm a little out of touch with that, so it's a bit harder for me to describe that, but you can probably understand what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah. Yeah. They're incredibly vulnerable and also almost always the target of aggressive and violent behavior. And that's just 100% baked into biology. And there's also the protection of the infant thing, which makes it even more sensitive. Um, and there's also an attraction to that thing. I think it's important to make the distinction that majority of attraction is not conscious.
Mm.
So when I say things like women like violence, it's not like they're like, think it. And very often women will, if you ask them what they will say a whole bunch of things that they would feel good about themselves for being attracted to, but they're not actually attracted to. And that's where the trope of like women lie about what they want and what they think all the time comes from. And I think it's more of a not wanting to look closely at their own motivations because it's rather uncomfortable. Whereas for men, it's pretty easy to go like, oh, what am I attracted to? You know, I can list them, but that would be inappropriate. And it's, none of that makes us uncomfortable. But we're all like, okay, that makes sense, and yeah, of course, I like that. Whereas for a woman to list it, I think it would make a woman somewhat uncomfortable in her nature, which I can't imagine how rough that is, to be honest. Might actually ask my wife about that now that I've thought it. That's got to be really difficult to contend with your nature when your nature is that way. And I imagine they feel the same with us in violence. For a man to contend with his nature being aggressive and violent and somewhat in a sexual way too. And I guess it's the
Ooh.
same, but in a different way.
I'm just wondering if a version of that pattern may be at play in my psyche with my relationship to my own potential for violence.
Okay,
Just
could you expand on that?
oh. I also feel like it's important to point out we demand the right to be wrong. We are saying this and exploring these concepts, but we demand the right to be wrong.
That's what this show is. Fumbling in the Dark was the one of the um Fumbling in the Abyss was one of the potential names for this,
Yeah.
which is still good. I do like that, but it can be the subtitle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will be wrong, and that's like the point of this whole thing.
So as you were talking about the probable crimes and threat, the probable and already known crimes and threat that are posed to us on a cultural existential level, I was getting the feeling of staring, sort of like standing with my face against a blank white wall, and I feel like there's something on the other side of that.
Yeah, your subconscious wouldn't be giving you imagery like that without a reason.
You know, I'd previously found the aspect of myself that I've termed the caveman side, the predator, um, who also turned out to be an element of a defender, sort of like walking my son to school and having the thought of, I will keep them safe, and sort of thoughts of will to do violence to anyone who directly threatened those kids.
Mm. It's a spirit of violence.
Hmm. But I feel like now this is getting into the speaking from emotions type of thing. So it's not right or wrong, it's chasing a trail in my mind. So, yeah. But I feel like there's rage is a thing that exists somewhere.
Mm.
And uh, the experiences of crying when I'd accidentally hurt my brother when I was a child come to mind.
Yeah, it seems that there was an inflection or a decision point there, maybe.
Yeah.
Suppression of something. I think righteous anger is a good concept to think about.
Hmm. Because it's like as a child with other children, it's like I don't want to hurt. I was gonna say hurt others, but it's interesting that that thought stopped there. I don't want to hurt empathy, because feeling the hurt that you cause.
Mm. Yeah, understanding that could be targeted to you, maybe. If I don't hurt others, maybe someone won't hurt me. People who think a world without violence is possible, so they will be pacifist.
That doesn't sound unlikely, but at the same time, it doesn't feel right.
Mm.
It's like,
Or I'm just,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
throwing
definitely.
whatever at the wall.
Yeah. Um, it's the hurt is in the moment of causing hurt. It's in the connected to the sense of failure.
Mm.
It's like,
Interesting. Or archetype of a intellectual or a savior is non-violent, because you mentioned that you held yourself to that standard,
mm,
and I'm sure that was, heavily encouraged by your parents with how deep it is. The image of who you wanted to be is not a person who was violent, maybe. Again, I'm
I
just throwing
yeah,
anything
yeah,
I
yeah,
can at it.
definitely, and it's helpful. Yeah. Um, I don't recall sort of strong encouragement like that from my parents, but it might have been internalized before I can remember, so I can't put that aside. But then it's like that.
Implicit in your education, maybe.
Yeah, it feels earlier. It feels as different philosophical systems would define it differently, but it feels innate at like early school age.
Maybe something about hitting or fighting with other kids. We don't allow kids to do that. Tell them off.
Oh, the worst I can remember.
That's wrong. Don't hit. That's wrong.
Yeah, the worst I can remember doing was there was a girl who was annoying me and teasing me in a poking sense, and she'd stuck her arm over my shoulder as I was playing or trying to play in the sandpit, and I grabbed her arm, just sort of leant forward, and she tipped over top of me and landed in front of me, and that's the only sort of physical thing I can remember doing, and it stuck in my head because of that.
That certainly just popped up now.
Yeah,
It's interesting that it's a girl, too. I think that's gonna change your perception. Like there's something there about, oh, I hurt someone I should be protecting.
I did feel a bit guilty about hurting her, like, oh, I didn't mean to hurt you, but also a bit grumpy of I was annoyed with you.
Or pleased that you did it. An enjoyment of it, maybe, that you found. I could see you being traumatized by your enjoyment of hurting someone you shouldn't at a young age, and then, having an overreaction to that.
I can't say it's not, but I can't say it is either.
That's the trouble with early childhood issues. It's so long ago, and the memory's so much not there. You just sort of have to guess at it,
Mm.
or what this might be, or what that might be, and it's.
And eventually you get the right guess at the right time in the right state of mind with the right things having been said before, and then it clicks. Because if
I
any of
mean,
those aren't at
maybe,
play,
but I mean, how do you know? If you can't remember, how do you know? Like you can
mm,
say it all fits emotionally, and it's been a revelation, and you feel better, and that's generally the only way that I can tell, personally. But I didn't actually know.
well, it's not so much about the objective truth of what happened, it's about the current internal state. And the
Mm,
the revelation may not in fact come from a past event as such, but a personality or memory structure that currently
interpretation.
exists. And it could have
Yeah, so
been,
shifting in the emotional state that you feel that makes it go, ah, that was it. When you feel your being change.
mm, but that may be an amalgamation of three or a dozen different memories. No, that's pushing it too far. Three, four different memories, which then come together in
Could easily be, doesn't.
a misremembered thing that never actually happened, but finding that is the key to solving an emotional knot.
Mm. Because it caused a pattern in which you created a reaction or, yeah, a pattern back to it. And then that was the issue.
Mm. Something I'm getting a reluctance to talk about, going with the white wall, a sense of
Mm.
it being like translucent white perspex. It's like that's the type of imagery that it
Mm.
came up with, in the sense that there was something red behind it. Oh God, early exposure
I
to
have a
Christian.
meditative exercise for you.
Yeah, let me finish this bit first. That
Okay,
um,
go, go.
it feels like there's a devil behind the wall. At least the snatches of imagery fit that. Early exposure to Christianity or Catholicism. Mum took me and my brother to church when we were young before she sort of lost her sense of the value of the Catholic Church, and that stopped. But um, you can imagine that the same, oh no, it's probably where it came from, the sense of wanting to make the world a better place and to be good and so on, and um, uh, the sense that I need to do it in a from an early smattering of early Catholic education,
Maybe.
and a rather how would I describe the priest as the impressions I have of him as a child? Someone whose children were who small children as I was then was slightly afraid of.
Hmm. Interesting.
But yeah, it's like
I think that visualization is something that you should bring to your mind and play with.
because it felt like what was behind the white wall, the snatches I got were that was rage, and associated with a sort of a feeling in my stomach area of it's like it's wrapped up in a white wall that's and sealed away.
I would encourage you, and you don't have to do this now if this isn't what you want to do. Perhaps we could end this here, and this is something you could do as an exercise to see what you discover. Or I would encourage you to get into a state in which you could revisit that image, be present in it. And I would encourage you to walk up to the wall and to put your hand on it and to see through. Not to destroy the wall yet, though I have a feeling that might happen, but to make contact with that part. The imagery you're describing strikes me as very similar to imagery from, say, pop culture stories. I know. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to make any
Hmm.
associations in your head just yet.
I can play out the imagery in a slightly emotionally disconnected sense,
Yeah, no.
and well, that's what I'm
I
doing. I've been doing in my head at the moment.
Yeah,
Does
I
it?
think you need to be involved emotionally to experience this. You need to be present and not trying to describe it to me. I
Mm,
wouldn't want you to attempt to rerun this thing while not being fully there. If you're going to interact with the part of yourself in this way, it should be you doing it and not us and whoever is listening, and not for the purpose of this.
mm,
I think when you walk up and when you touch that wall, that glass, I think you need to approach it with some real seriousness, some deadly seriousness.
there's a real sense of danger.
Yes, it's not something you should do lightly. You should take very real care and real respect in doing so, which is why I don't think you should do it now.
Mm, yeah, it's uh, to describe the sense of danger. It's like sort of there's a dog who looks very aggressive over a fence, and someone saying, "Open the gate." Yeah,
Mm.
that's not the imagery in the mindscape, but it's descriptive of the feeling of a sense of danger in the pit of my stomach.
Well, it is certainly a dangerous thing I'm telling you to do, but I think it's necessary. I want to talk about it more, but I don't want to preempt anything. So I
Hmm.
think we should leave it here. I think you should do this as an exercise when you're able to be meditative and fully present in your imagination, in your psyche, doing this. I think you should do it, and then I think we should talk about it next time.
Yeah, I think I might ask for some um, higher help in the process too, because it's yeah,
Mhm. Whatever works for you,
yeah, yeah.
but taking it with with that degree of respect and seriousness is I think the important thing.
Hmm.
Reverence almost. Hmm. I really want to talk about it, but no, I think we should leave it there. I'm quite excited to hear about this actually.
Uh, I'm not really.
Hmm. Yeah, I
No
have lots of other
surprise.
things to say about it, but I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to influence in any way your experience. So I am looking forward to the next conversation
Yeah.
already.
Oh well. Good night. And
Yeah, I think we should leave it there, and good luck.
okay. Bye.
Yes, yeah.